Geek Out!
Hey man, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, no problem.
I appreciate it.
So you did Dress to Kill last time?
Dress to Kill last week. It's all about Destroyer this
That's
week.
the only... Dress to Kill is the only Kiss album my father owns.
Nice.
So...
No vinyl.
Whenever I ask him about it, he always says, we all make mistakes, son.
That's unfair. You got anything fun for the weekend planned?
Probably just gonna get a little drunk.
Cool.
Maybe get in the car, not while drinking,
Of course.
but...
All right. Welcome to another episode of Kiss My Podcast. I'm Jake. I still don't have a suitable intro, but any fans of this album we're going to be talking about hopefully got the little kind of nod, homage we did to the album we're going to be talking about this week, or this month, Destroyer, 1976. The album that pretty much, after Alive, puts Kiss on the map in terms of a studio band. Let's get all the fun/boring stuff out of the way here first. Released March 15th, 1976. Recorded from the 3rd to the 6th of September 1975 at Electric Lady Studios in New York, just like Dress to Kill. And then the bulk of it is January, February 1976 at Record Plant Studios in New York. We got some fun singles here, actually some rockin' singles, because like I said early on, those first three albums, there's some hits, but not like hits in terms of like chart status, but just kind of classics. But we got the first one, March 1st, 1976, Shout It Out Loud. Flaming Youth, April 30th, 1976. Detroit Rock City, July 28th, 1976. And then in August, we get the monster in 1976. That is Beth. So, before we kind of jump into this here, we do have another guest, as you might have heard in the beginning. A guy that got his own podcast all about the Beatles that he's nice enough to have me co-host with him every month. I Want to Tell You, a Beatles podcast. His favorite Beatles song of all time is why he named it I Want to Tell You, by the way. Bullshit. But you know him from Geek Out, and his name is Sam Stone. Thanks for coming on, Sam.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I kind of want to start off, I asked Kyle this last week, but him being the first guest, I'm trying to work out all the kinks into getting the guest on here. So I'm going to start off here. Who was your favorite member of Kiss and why?
Probably... It is a toss-up between Paul Stanley and Ace Frehley.
Okay.
This is, and we'll get to a track on this album too, but whenever I listen to a deep cut Kiss song, and I'm like, man, this one's really fucking good.
Yeah.
And then I look, and even if it's sung by Paul Stanley like he does on all the, almost all the songs on this one, I'm always like, who wrote this? And then I look at the listings, and it's like Ace fucking Frehley.
Ace, yeah, man. I had mentioned on one of the earlier podcasts that it's pretty much going to be gold if Ace writes it. So he's my favorite member as well. Kyle was talking about his favorite member is Ace. But I'm interested to see as we I know that the next couple of guests we're going to have on, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have a Gene and at least one or two more Aces. But we'll see. We'll see.
No Peters.
No Peters. We'll see. Who knows? But just some kind of fun stuff about this one before we dive in track by track. This is where we get the legendary their Sir George Martin / Bob Rock in the name and legend that is Bob Ezrin producing this album.
Was he picked by the band or was he picked by Casablanca?
I think he was picked by Casablanca because they knew,
because he had worked with Alice Cooper.
Yeah, and Alice Cooper plays a big part in this as well, especially their guitarist Dick Wagner, as we'll get in later. But he is pretty much the guy that they knew he could whip him into shape. And he really was. He was an not an actual, but he was kind of that literal music drill sergeant on this album. He would have a whistle and he would blow it and yell at them and be like, "Hey guys, you need to learn basic music theory." And this is the album that it shows on that, because not just the production being so high quality, and this is the album that I always refer to. Like, if you're a Kiss fan since the beginning in 1970s. And you're like buying the first Kiss album, you're buying Hotter Than Hell, you're buying Dress to Kill, and they all have their moments and they're solid. But either it's, I don't understand why the first Kiss album wasn't as big as a hit. Probably because hindsight's 2020. The second,
they're also unknown at that point.
Exactly. The second album, the production is terrible, and the third album, Dress to Kill, is great, but it's so paper thin. And so these fans have to be frustrated, going, "Yo, I just saw Kiss in Cobo Hall." in Detroit, and it was the greatest fucking show I've ever seen. Check out this song. And he puts on Dress to Kill, and it's just super thin. And his friends are probably going, what the fuck is this? Like, this isn't a rock and roll band. Here, check out Zeppelin. And so then basically after...
That's right, Zeppelin's still a thing at this point.
Yeah, after Alive comes out, you know, you can blast them away with Alive, but this is the album that you sit them down as a studio band and say, listen to them capture this in the studio. Destroyer, a perfect name for it. Again, I say Bob Ezrin is kind of the Bob Rock too, because we'll get to Music from the Elder later, which isn't entirely his fault, but he's such a great producer and such an important character in the Kiss story. And like I said, he just made them really better musicians because of his work ethic. And Paul Stanley, you know, talked about him really being, like I said, that drill sergeant. But, you know, again, it captures so much of what makes that band Kiss in studio form, which was so huge because they hadn't done that before. Although Casablanca only signed them for 2 more albums after this because they still weren't entirely sure that this was going to have staying power.
Yeah, if Alive was just a fluke.
Yeah, seriously.
Because at this point, I don't know how much you went into it necessarily. You know, between Dress to Kill and Destroyer, they put out Alive, so now they're on everybody's radar.
Yeah, I mean, this is the album. Yeah, exactly. They're on the radar because that album is so monumental.
It goes at least gold.
Yeah, the first one they go straight gold. You know, and then all the albums previous start going gold because of Alive. You know, Alive is what saves the band.
Yeah. It's like what I Want to Hold Your Hand did for all the Beatles singles in North America pre I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, you know, this is very much Kiss's Sgt. Pepper. And I say that because, again, Bob Ezrin brings in the strings. He brings in sound effects, reverse drums. He also brings in, and this becomes kind of a Kiss staple.
His kids?
Yeah, well, that. Yeah, we'll get to that. But he brings in other musicians. And by other musicians, I mean an uncredited musician, which unfortunately becomes a very much of a Kiss staple later on. And that's not something to, I think, when I was a kid, it really bummed me out when I found stuff like that out. But for me, it was Gene and Paul trying to hold the band together. And this is the beginning of that. And we get it with Dick Wagner, the guitarist in Alice Cooper, who comes on and plays on 3 different tracks and lays down 2 great solos that you can clearly hear aren't Ace Frehley. And they're on Ace Frehley tracks, which are weird. Yeah. But you can clearly hear the difference. But we'll point this out as we get to them.
Is Dress to Kill the last Kiss album that has all 4 actual Kiss members?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times they usually say Love Gun is like the last, like, untouched in terms of like Kiss
but this one's
members.
Touched.
But this one is touched. But in terms of like them all kind of like being there, it's really seen as the last of the core Kiss thing. Again, this is only 3 guitar parts on 3 different songs. One of them only none of the other Kiss members are on except Peter Criss, and I guess you can guess that one. But let's talk about the album cover real quick. Drawn by Ken Kelly. You might know him from, he also drew Love Gun, which I would say, in my opinion, I like more than the cover for Destroyer. And part of that is because his original rendition or his original sketch for Destroyer was turned down by the record label because it was too violent.
Yeah, because it had like burning buildings, which apparently in 1976 was still...
Yeah, and so instead you get them like just jumping like, like, you know, like a...
Kind of stomping like,
yeah. And they were originally wearing their Alive outfits too. You know, much like superheroes and action figures, they get the Destroyer outfits on this one instead. If you really want to see that cover, or at least the original cover with the Alive outfits, when they did Kiss Destroyer Resurrected in 2012, where they put some stuff back in, remixed it, Bob Ezrin overlooked that.
You're not a fan of Resurrected?
Not as much because, like, Detroit Rock City, they add some really weird vocals to it that I don't think need to be there.
Is the children chanting still there?
It's still there.
That's always
it's
because it's Bob Ezrin's kids.
Yeah, it's because it's Bob Ezrin's kids, and he was trying to make it creepy. But we can dive into that later. But anyway, I thought Chris, who's here, might enjoy this. Ken Kelly drew a lot of Manowar covers as well, so I know Chris is all about some Manowar. He also worked on Tarzan as well, and he also really cool. He did
Tarzan.
Yeah, he did. I was watching that trailer a bunch of times today, and I was like, "Fuck, I can't wait for this movie." But you know, actually, Skarsgård, he took that role because his dad loved the original so much that he wanted to impress his dad, which I thought was kind of a sweet little thing. But anyway, back to Kiss. Not that we have to stay on topic here. Anyway, Ken Kelly also draws Ace Frehley's album Space Invader, which is a really great fucking album, by the way, if you haven't heard it, which is, I think, 2 years old now. But check that out. And... yeah, I mean, again, Ken Kelly really, again, is another guy. You get Bob Ezrin, you get Ken Kelly, 2 guys who are paramount to putting together that Kiss monster. So, okay, we got all the fun / not really fun, boring stuff out of the way. Let's dive into the tracks. The first one we have is the iconic, in my opinion, the greatest Kiss song ever written, Detroit Rock City. So you got it written by Paul Stanley, written by Bob Ezrin, of course, sung by Paul Stanley. Again, for me, the little kind of homage Sam and I did with helps with Chris as well. In the beginning of this song, a lot of people have only ever heard the single version, which is fine.
Just cuts right into the guitar.
It cuts right into the guitars. It fades into this, the classic guitar riff, and also cuts out a lot of the harmony stuff in the chorus, which is kind of a bummer because it's so really cool. It kind of like almost a progressive feel to it. But you get kind of a progressive rock band opening where you get sound effects and you get someone pouring themselves a drink, excuse me, getting in the car and getting ready to go to a rock show. And as they turn on the radio, there is a news broadcast of a teenager who was killed in a head-on collision. The voice is by Gene Simmons, of course. He has that great kind of deep voice that works very well for that. And then listens to bits of Alive, kind of tunes in and out and starts singing to Rock and Roll All Night. Revs the car engine on and goes driving into the night to go see Kiss, and that's when we get the explosion that is the opening of Detroit Rock City. The song is written about and mentioned in the beginning about a fan who was killed on his way to a Kiss concert, kind of a almost rock and roll in memoriam to this fan.
Was it around Detroit?
I guess so. Yeah, it must have been around Detroit. And again, a band that's so heavily
New York,
rooted in New York. I mean, all of them are either, except for Gene, who was born in Israel,
but he grew up in
New York.
Yeah.
Their roots are in New York. They're
this
a New York
album was
band.
recorded in New York.
Yeah, exactly. But the funny thing is, the Cobo Hall shows are what are recorded for Alive, and those are in Detroit. And also, they had that famous thing where they go and they invaded that high school, and they basically had the keys for the town, and this big thing when they dressed up with the football players, because the football players were on a losing streak, and they listened to Kiss in the locker room to get pumped up, and they went undefeated. And so Kiss visited them in a helicopter. It was something out of A Hard Day's Night. It's a really cool thing, and so that was what really started to bond Kiss with Detroit. And I think this is kind of a little tip of the hat to them because
they're as the name suggests, their movie Detroit Rock City takes place in Detroit.
Exactly, yeah, and it's kind of a tip of the hat to this town or this city and state that really invited them in with open arms.
Really brought me inside,
But what do you have to say about Detroit Rock City, Sam? Where does it fall in your Kiss radar?
Oh, it's I'm not necessarily the biggest Kiss fan in the whole wide world, but what I am a fan of is motherfucking rock and roll.
Yeah.
And
well, I remember you jumped, like I said, when you kind of got first dibs on this because, like I said, you're nice enough to have me on the Beatles podcast, and I remember you were just like, Destroyer, I want Destroyer, and I was like, you got it, man, because
they never get more fucking rock and roll than they do on Destroyer.
Yeah.
I love some of their later stuff. I love some of their earlier stuff, but Destroyer for me is heads and shoulders above any other studio album they've ever put out. And I think Detroit Rock City, the cool thing about this album is so many of these tracks, there's a few that maybe don't, Beth, Great Expectations, whatever, but so many of these tracks can be album openers.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And I've, show starters, show stoppers, they're just, and this is one of them. I mean, It's a great way to open up the album. And of course, to get the full effect, you got to get that album version, not the single version where you get the, I guess, basically Paul Stanley singing to himself.
Yeah.
And then dying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is one that,
because at the end of the song, the car crashes. It'll blow your eardrums out, too, because it is loud. I mean, they put the special effects in there like a motherfucker.
But it has one of the most rock and roll lines of all time where the main character realizes he's going to die, and the line is, I've got to laugh because I know I'm going to die. Why? And then he just But then you get also that great boom 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 from Peter Criss. Everyone's fired on all cylinders. Ace Frehley has even gone on record in his book saying this is one of his favorite songs and melodies and guitar parts he's ever played, and he didn't write it. So that's Ace is well aware of how big this song is, and it's also showing Bob Ezrin is a super important songwriter with Kiss, as we're going to see on this album. He's on here a lot, credited. Also, another really cool guy who's on the next track is pretty much responsible for the Runaways, and that's Kim Fowley. And he helped write the next song, King of the Nighttime World, with Paul Stanley, Mark Anthony, and Bob Ezrin. Yeah,
what I like about this, one of the things I like about a good album, kind of track by track, kind of, I like when albums flow seamlessly.
Yeah.
The Abbey Road medley, the Going Away to College to What's My Age Again by Blink-182. Sorry, hyped, because they just put out a new single today.
That's fine.
But
let your freak flag fly.
maybe that's the next music-based single, like, and watch like the download numbers just plummet. It's like, hey,
so they actually released a single today?
They released a single today. Yeah.
Is it good?
It's all right. It's like Blink-182 by way of Alkaline Trio.
Oh, that's right, because they don't have all the...
They don't have all the small things. They don't have Tom DeLonge.
But
yeah, he just put out an interview with Rolling Stone. Anyway, taking it back, I do like how the car crash from Detroit Rock City segues right into King of the Nighttime World. And, this is another track that could very much be an album opener, albeit on probably a lesser album.
Yeah.
And the track title, King of the Nighttime World, sounds like it could be in Music from the Elder.
Yeah. It also sounds like it could be like a Conan or Tarzan book.
Yeah, it's just like Paul Stanley, like, King, I'm the king of the night.
Yeah, and the Headlight Queen. Like, it's a song that has such a swagger to it.
Yeah.
The drum beat and the guitar has this super sexy swagger to it that only Paul Stanley can accomplish. Of course, he sings it as well, like we were saying. But yeah, I love how it picks up right out of the wreckage is this lone guitar note that just hangs there. And just as it's about to break, the whole band catches back up and kicks back in.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't catch your breath in these first two tracks.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just fantastic. It's furiously paced. One of my favorite Paul tracks of all time. And again, I've said it a bunch of times before, that sass, that bitchy Paul Stanley vocal is in full effect here. Like, I can't see how he didn't like do that Paul Stanley, like, jig back and forth as he's singing along, singing this in the studio.
Yeah, when you hear Paul Stanley sing, you can, and if you've ever seen him live, you can kind of visualize how he'd probably be like in the sound booth
with the massive hair. He does that thing where like he'll run up to the microphone with his fingers out and be like, "It's so sad living at home," and then he'll like back up and then run back in, far from the city, and then he just creates these great little worlds. And again, they are, kind of the Kiss, classic Kiss lyrics associated, but it has that element of the wreckage and the carnage that is Destroyer.
Yeah, he's like reborn.
Yeah, out of this crash,
He's reborn as the king of the nighttime world.
King of the nighttime world. So
Nightman.
Yeah, you're right. If Paul Stanley is the king of the nighttime world, the next track we get, Gene Simmons is the God of Thunder.
Yeah, it's very much kind of his theme.
Kind of his theme. The funny thing is,
would you call it this? It's between this or Dr. Love.
Yeah, well, it's funny because Gene didn't write this song, and Paul Stanley did. And the funny thing is, I am one of those guys that I remember once I was making like a playlist, and I was like, I made semi-jokingly my perfect version of Destroyer, and it was I put the demo in instead of the
Paul Stanley vocals.
The Paul Stanley vocals. Where it doesn't really work because it's not heavy, but it actually fits perfectly with King of the Nighttime World, where then he's the God of Thunder and Paul Stanley singing it, and you get the kind of the doo-wop 60s vocals during the chorus.
Raised by demons.
Yeah. So, of course, it lends itself more to Gene with that deep voice, the bass, the heaviness. But unfortunately, like we've mentioned earlier on in the podcast, Bob Ezrin decided, I don't know if it's because, like we were mentioning with 70s horror films, like kids were creepy, but he decided to have his kids recorded in the intro to make it sound creepy, and instead it just makes it sound confusing.
Dumb and annoying.
Dumb and annoying, yeah.
Like, it's a song that, like, I don't know how many times I've heard God of Thunder, but, like, it always throws me off as soon as those fucking kids come in.
Yeah, luckily they're not in it too much. Like,
they're in it enough.
It kind of kicks in.
They're in
it
more than enough.
And I'm not a fan of the kids. I think the song's fine. I like Dr. Love way more for talking about, like,
Gene themes.
Even like I said, even though he didn't write this one, but
When You Wish Upon a Star.
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, Gene's got some balls on him for some of the stuff he does. That's for sure. Love him or hate him for it. But
yeah, I mean, this is like just a fucking like just a hard rock and roll number.
Yeah,
and it's like it just captures that kind of like grungy, dirty. Like I thought Rob Zombie was a fucking genius for starting out his version of Halloween with it.
Oh yeah.
And it would have been like the perfect rock song if it didn't have those fucking kids.
Just
such a heavy, just like pounding song, like just Peter on that bass drum and like
and
the bass.
This is where you get the reverse drums as well in it, which is a cool little trick they do.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a Kiss classic for sure. Kiss classic with the capital K. But it's funny. Check out the demo. See what you guys think, because I really love the demo. I think it's a really great, catchy song. Again, of course, it doesn't make entirely as much sense because it's not super heavy. But I really dig the demo actually more than the studio album.
Yeah,
studio version of myself. Speaking of Gene, Great Expectations is next.
Is this the worst song on the album?
Probably, but I love the melody and the score and the strings, which they pull basically from Beethoven and don't credit him. But like the arrangement,
He's dead.
yeah,
It's all fair use.
yeah, right. But the lyrics are classic trashy Gene, because like this is his way of like introducing the band, and so he was originally going to have him by name, but you get that iconic line,
you clutch your breast.
you stand and clutch your breast, our music drives you wild along with the rest. But then you get the great the band though. I love the music. I love the music to it. It doesn't fit with Kiss entirely because it is very symphonic.
Yeah, they're trying to make a ballad. Like, there's 2 ballads on this album if you count this one. And I never thought I'd say it, but Gene Simmons writes a worse ballad than Peter Criss.
Yeah. So yeah, Gene
you stand and clutch your breasts. That's one of the first lines in the song too.
And then the line about "You've got great expectations," like, "Oh, you want to fuck me?" That's basically what the song is like. Yeah. You got great expectations. Parentheses. "Oh, you want to fuck me?"
Oh, girl, you got taste. Yeah.
So again, written by Gene and Bob Ezrin. Though.
Speaking of taste, do you have Daylight with Sylvester Stallone on DVD?
That's one of the few Stallone movies I do not own. I own his softcore porn, but I do not own Daylight on DVD. So,
damn.
Yeah.
Stand and clutch your breasts.
Yeah, stand and clutch your breasts. But I dig the music. It feels out of place, especially with the first 3 tracks. But it's an example of them trying to branch out, I guess. And it kind of is almost a decades ahead of their time, where they're gonna play in a live 4 with the symphony.
Yeah.
That's one of those versions that works really well with the orchestra, of course.
Well, I mean, how many times after Destroyer do they try to go really ballady? Probably trying to top Peter Criss.
The next album after this, they try to go ballady with Peter Criss singing a much better song, in my opinion, than Beth. And I'm not one of those guys that just hates Beth. I think it's a fine song, but it's kind of it became this like fucking bad word with like quote unquote diehard Kiss fans because of introducing other people to it. Which I think, fuck yeah, it introduces as many people as you want to Kiss. If Beth is the gateway, then let them in. Then they can get their faces blown off by Detroit Rock City. But
we'll talk about Beth in a second.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is just about Detroit Rock City is that was the A side, and it didn't do shit when it came out.
Yeah.
It was the B side that they flipped it over, and it was Beth. But anyway, Great Expectations. I think it showcases some of Gene's vocal range. That I think he actually has a pretty good vocal range, and in the chorus, even though it's all ridiculous, the song's entirely ridiculous. It shows off some of his vocal range. And that's the best things I can say about Great Expectations. The next song, though, they ramp it back up. They ramp it back up with a song called Flaming Youth, which is...
that's one of those tracks where I'm like, hey, man, this is really, like, this is a deep cut, even though I think it was released as a single. This is a deep cut that is really fucking cool. And then I look at the liner notes, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
This was written by Ace.
Ace has got a stamp of approval on it. It's one of those songs kind of like Abbey Road, where you got Ace, Paul, and Gene writing 3 separate songs, and Bob Ezrin comes in, so Bob Ezrin gets a credit as well, and mashes these 3 songs together to create Flaming Youth. This is also a song where if you hear the solo and you're like, that sounds fucking crazy, it's because it's not Ace Frehley, it's Dick Wagner. Again, from Alice Cooper fame, he comes in and lays down a pretty great solo. It's not super Ace Frehley style, so at the time, I couldn't tell when I was a kid. It doesn't matter. It's a great solo that fits the song. But one of my favorite Kiss lines of all time, when I was a kid, I was an angry, 7th or 8th grader listening to Kiss on cassette. The line, my parents think I'm crazy and they hate the things I do. I'm stupid and I'm lazy. Man, if they only knew that Flaming Youth will set the world on fire. And I was just like this 8th grade kid, and I was like, that's me. That was one of those things where like you listen to a band or song, you're like, they're talking to me. And I was like, yes. I remember sitting there, being this stupid little angry 8th grade kid, not doing his homework and being a terrible student, and being like, that Paul Stanley's talking to me. And that was one of the reasons that Flaming Youth has always got I love the song, but it's always got a little bit more for me than just a great Kiss song.
Yeah.
Because it takes me back to really discovering Kiss as a middle schooler for the first time on cassette and falling in love with this song, especially. I think it's just a really cool song, and it really course corrects after Great Expectations.
It does, and honestly, like King of the Nighttime World, like I was saying, is kind of like, it could be an album opener on a lesser Kiss album. It's maybe not one of my favorite tracks on the album. This could be an album opener on a awesome Kiss album.
Yeah, I mean, you get Paul Stanley's classic, "Oh yeah," and they just, again, the whole production there is fantastic, and I really enjoy Flaming Youth. A great title for a song too.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I feel like Paul Stanley was trying to reach out to those kids that were listening to Kiss, and it worked.
Sounds like an alt band name.
Yeah,
really.
it
Kind of like
does.
Sonic Youth.
Yeah, and it reached out to me definitely, and I'm sure it reached out to other kids, who might have not known Kiss. So many people didn't know Kiss before this, because it's not as easy now to discover a band like it was back then.
First studio album to go platinum.
Probably. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's between Alive and this, it was a monster, and they really rode that wave for a while. And these next couple albums are gonna be really fun to talk about. But yeah, Flaming Youth, Kiss classic in my opinion, 100%. Sweet Pain is probably the most. Between that and Great Expectations are probably the two most lesser known songs on the album.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a highlight, but it's better. It's the better Gene Simmons track.
Yeah, again, this one kind of nice. You get just written by Gene and sung by Gene. So Gene is working hard on this one. He puts in some great stuff on this, even though he's not writing as much on this album. The last two albums, really, he hasn't been writing as much. Paul Stanley is
even his biggest track, God of Thunder, is not.
Yeah, he's taken over. He's been taken over by Paul Stanley, really.
Yeah.
On this one. But it has that weird moaning intro from Gene, where he's like, And
it makes kind of perfect sense that Gene Simmons would write a song called Sweet Pain.
Yeah.
Didn't he write a song about butt sex on the first album?
It's the second album, I think.
Right,
it was the first album.
Yep.
Multiple songs he's written. We can't, yeah.
Maybe this one too?
But again, yeah, Jesus. The chorus, Gene Simmons is a master at choruses, in my opinion. Really good at getting to that chorus. The Don't Bore Us, get to the chorus, Tom Petty mantra. But I dig the guitar work. Another song that Dick Wagner plays the solo on. It's not Ace Frehley. But I think it's good. I think it's the best. I think obviously Gene has his fingers in other pies on this album, but I think it's I like this song better than God of Thunder, in my opinion. I just think it's a really cool track. It
doesn't have any fucking kids.
Well, yeah, it's an example where they kind
Ezrin.
They try to make something different, a la Great Expectations, but Sweet Pain Sweet Pain is a track that works on Destroyer, it being not necessarily this super hard rock song. It does have moments of getting heavy. It has a moment later on in the track that sounds like it's straight out of God of Thunder. Almost, the riff and everything as well. But it's a song that's just really kind of cool. They do that thing where like you can tell they're strumming backwards on the guitar. Just little things like that to give them a cool little ambiance to it. Maybe overdubbing some acoustic stuff on top of the electric stuff, especially during the chorus. You can hear that, and it's just some cool little effects that I really dig on the song. So again, I like Sweet Pain.
Yeah. At this time, the idea of a pick slide is kind of new too. If you think about it, pick slides aren't really used in the '60s and early '70s.
Yeah, it's Again, they're learning little tricks of the trade, and they're going to remember those for the rest of their career, especially with the next at least 2 or 3 albums. The next one I know Sam and Chris have a closeness in their heart of hearts for, as well as every Kiss fan that's shouted out loud.
Oh yeah, man. And I feel like this was the pre-album release single. This was the lead single off the album. I really feel like they were like, hey man, if you liked Rock and Roll All Night, you're gonna fucking love this.
Yeah, you can see that with Kiss a lot, where again they're businessmen, where they're like, oh, that worked, let's do that part 2.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, this is better than Rock and Roll All Night. This is a better song, in my opinion. I know that might be blasphemy, but I think it works better. It's
a more intricate song.
Yeah, it's not as
complex.
It's not as iconic. But it's Gene and Paul and Bob Ezrin write this track, and I always love when Gene and Paul share vocals. And they do the dueling vocal and the stuff really well, just the back and forth, give and take. I think it's one of those songs that, like I said, I think it's better than Rock and Roll All Night overall.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. You know, it's yeah. No, yeah. It's, all the people in the neighborhood. Hello,
Yeah.
hello.
I always love the little like things Paul Stanley would do. There's a really cool thing on one of the History box sets. I think it's volume 2, where Eric Carr's in the band, and I can't remember exactly if I think maybe in Australia or whatever, but they're wearing the Dynasty era outfits, which are fucking awesome. Which is weird because
Carr wasn't in the band.
Carr wasn't in the band, but they're wearing him anyway. And he's got the Fox makeup on. He's just double bass like a motherfucker. He turned the Detroit Rock City into like a straight up metal song with a double bass. Like he added the double kick, and it was just so fucking cool to hear his version of it, and just plays that drums like a motherfucker. But Paul Stanley would do this really cool thing that I've never heard him do anywhere else. I don't even know if he did it in any other performances on the tour, but he changed the melody a bit on Detroit Rock City, and it totally changes the whole intro of the song, and it's a really cool thing. Maybe he was just feeling really confident that night because he goes higher instead of lower, and it's really kind of cool during the opening. Anyway, Shout It Out Loud is one of the songs I think that, you know, they have a lot of fun live. I remember when I saw them live at Jiffy Lube, and they played it, and it was just so fucking cool. Like, I mean, it's just the you know, it's almost like they wrote the breaks in the song for the fucking fireworks, man. Like, it's so
it's very
fucking
much
cool.
Yeah, it's very much kind of like a wait until like Alive 2 guys. When you hear this one, it's gonna blow your nuts off.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's massive. It's a really great Kiss track. I remember playing this in college once, just kind of on in the background, and my roommate had never heard it before. And the song ended, and he turned to me, and one of my other buddies was in there, and he had never heard it either. And he was like, "Play that again. That fucking ruled." And I was like, "Right on, man." Yeah. And it was the studio version too. It wasn't the. I was like, "You want to hear a fucking ripping motherfucker? Check out the Alive 2 or any of the other." It's been on every live album and compilation since.
It's a live staple
massive.
now.
It's massive.
I don't know if they've had a tour since Destroyer.
Probably not. And the fact that they could have a song like this and Rock and Roll All Night in their in their bag of tricks is pretty
arsenal.
Great. Yeah, they're a literal arsenal of fireworks and shooting them off like crazy people. But the next song is the song that Destroyer, out of all of the heaviness, all the craziness, all the debauchery and destroyed buildings and and heavy guitar riffs and sweet pain, comes the song that's most known for on the album, and that's Beth.
Beth. This is a song where you listen to it and you're like, how the fuck is this the biggest Kiss single of all time? And I'm sure Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons look at each other and say the same thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, part of it is because
I get it. It's a ballad.
Yeah, it's 1976, and
the best-selling album of 1976 is Boston's self-titled debut. I get it. It's a ballad.
Yeah, and they kind of were like, "Oh, doing this song." Again, Peter Criss is credited for co-writing the song. If you ask Paul Stanley in his book, he flat out says, like almost verbatim, Peter Criss had nothing to do with that track.
Yeah, it pisses those two off to no end.
So you also get Stan Penridge, who is guitarist of a band called Chelsea, which is a band that Peter Criss is with before. So this is a song that the roots of this song are written before Kiss ever existed, like a lot of Wicked Lester songs did, of course, that became Kiss tracks, like She. And Bob Ezrin helps write it too. Bob Ezrin probably being the guy that really wrote this song outside of its basics, skeleton bones that were the Chelsea song. It was also originally called Beck, and I don't remember exactly who it was, probably a Bob Ezrin, who was like, "We're not naming a ballad called Beck," and they changed it to Beth because they didn't want any kind of confusion. And so this is the song that Peter Criss would go out, sing with the Blue Rose. He would sit at the end, the girls would go crazy, and he would sing the song. No other members of Kiss are on this track, but Dick Wagner's on it. Dick Wagner plays acoustic guitar like a motherfucker on this. And does a great job, of course, unfortunately being uncredited. But we all know now that he was on this track. It's massive. It's the song that the story, they always have the story set where it sounds ridiculous, but the brothers or the would be listening to this, Kiss, Detroit Rock City, and then their sisters would flip it over and hear Beth, and they became obsessed with Beth, and that pissed the guys off that girls like Kiss and blah blah blah. And Gene Simmons was like, "What do you mean? How would that piss you? Now we have girls coming to the concert. Before it was just all guys. It was all guys coming to Kiss shows. Now we have women coming to Kiss shows. So the band, of course, reaped the rewards of this in terms of money and popularity and singles like crazy. And it's one of those songs that when I saw them live and Eric Singer comes out and sings it, it's that's an iconic moment of the show. That's just as iconic as Gene flying up with the bat wings, or spitting the blood, or Paul Stanley
during God of Thunder.
Yeah, or Paul Stanley smashing his guitar,
or riding the rope
riding the rope onto the giant record during "I Was Made for Loving You," and it's like the coolest moment of everyone's life at that collective moment. But yeah, I mean, you hear the stories in Paul Stanley's book, especially, Face the Music, which I recommend more than any other Kiss member's book. It's like the encyclopedia of all things Kiss. Like, Paul Stanley's book is paramount. Like, that's such a great Kiss read. But he basically, he shreds Peter Criss in this one, being like, we had to sit there and or Bob Ezrin had to sing the line to Peter Criss so he could sing it back in the microphone. Which, again, I'm sure that probably happened, but Peter Criss was able to do it live every night unless they had an earpiece in, So, hey, everyone rips on Peter Criss, but at the end of the day, he had his name's on the biggest, selling Kiss single. He's also the lowest grossing member of Kiss, which is unfortunate.
Oh, for his solo album?
Well, in terms of just money, because of his, what happened post-Kiss, unfortunately. But
sure.
Yeah, man, Beth is huge. Beth is a monster. And like we said, Detroit Rock City was the A-side. And they flipped it over, and they're like, hey, let's check out this song called Beth. And it blew people's minds, and it put Kiss everywhere. It's kind of almost like Yesterday. Like Yesterday is just Paul Stanley. In terms of Kiss members, Beth is pretty much just Peter Criss.
Or Paul McCartney.
Yeah, Paul McCartney and then Peter Criss on Beth.
Yeah, I think the Beatles would be even more perturbed if 16-year-old at the time, Paul Stanley was on Yesterday.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Paul Stanley. I would love to hear the Beatles the Kiss just cover the Beatles.
Yeah.
Because, again,
they were an influence.
That was their... In Gene and Paul's words, they were the blueprint for them. They wanted to be A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles, all the time. They were trying, so hard to be that and achieve that success. And Beth is, like it or love, it's their Yesterday, really. So,
yeah.
But again, at the end of the day, I think the instrumentation, the melody, and the string arrangement for Bob Ezrin is great, and I think it's a really good song. But kind of like with Shout It Out Loud and Rock and Roll All Night, their follow up to Beth with Peter Criss on a song called Hard Luck Woman, I think slays Beth. But we'll get to that next time.
Yeah.
The last track that's not hidden on the album is called Do You Love Me?
Do you really want to learn me? I know it's not how it goes.
Yeah. But written by Paul and Kim Fowley. And again, Kim Fowley, if everyone was like, what do you mean Kim Fowley and the Runaways? Played by Michael Shannon in the movie The Runaways. He's basically the guy that got the band together. Joan Jett and Kim Fowley unfortunately passed away, I think, a year or two ago. Super eccentric, crazy kind of guy in the music industry, but helped write a lot of songs you know and love, one of them being Do You Love Me? And he also, I saw a picture of him, he always used to wear a shirt, I'm Not Kim Fowley. But basically, it is my favorite Michael Shannon performance, because he's not like curmudgeon all the time. He's like fucking crazy, and he's so just amazing in the Runaways.
You should watch Premium film. Rush.
Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. But again, him and Joan Jett basically wrote the core of the Runaways stuff. Cherie Currie didn't have the best things to say about Kim Fowley when they were younger. I think because he could be kind of a weird dude, but he's an interesting guy to check out, and it's interesting that he's one of the guys who is part of the Kiss story. And Do You Love Me Again, sung by Paul Stanley. I really fucking love this song. I think Peter's drum opening, just this solo, just him hitting the drums are great, and you get the naked Paul Stanley vocals coming in, and all me again as like a 7th, 8th grader listening to the line, you like my 7-inch pause, leather heels, and going to all the shows, and I remember thinking, oh, I know what they mean by that, classic, Paul Stanley throwing that in there,
and of course, Paul Stanley would co-write a song called Do You Love Me?
Yeah, of course,
yeah,
but he's got a song called Come On and Love Me on the previous album. Yeah. Come on and love me. Great song.
Like, but adore me, please.
Yeah, please. It's got the wedding bells in the end, which I always thought was pretty funny, because kind of about this, this groupie that everybody knows, like they even know her name. I always loved the quote unquote backstage pass section of the song where Paul Stanley sounds like he's singing through like a megaphone. And the guitars. This is a song that builds. You got the naked drums and vocals in the beginning, and it builds to fucking wedding bells at the end. I think it's a highlight on the album. It's one of my favorite I know I say it a lot, but Paul Stanley writes a lot of great Kiss tracks. One of my favorite tracks on the album, for real. And a really great way to close it. Like, what better way to close not Dynasty, Jesus, Destroyer than with fucking like wedding bells and just every instrument being thrown in there.
It'd probably be a good way to close out Dynasty too. Who knows?
Yeah, probably.
But I mean, it isn't even technically the end.
No, it's not the end. You get this non-starter nothingness of a song, not
Her
even
Majesty.
a song really. Yeah, called. I didn't actually know the title of the song until fairly recently. But Rock and Roll Party, a hidden track. I didn't know the title because when I first listened to this album, there was no like really internet to go on and check, and they never had the title listed anywhere on anything. So
a true hidden track.
Yeah, true hidden track through and through, and it's not actually really anything. It's just noise and Paul Stanley going live audience stuff. But it's credited to Gene, Paul, and Bob Ezrin. Instrumental, so of course you don't really have anything to it. But yeah, just kind of I don't know, maybe because Sgt. Pepper had a hidden track or hidden nonsense in the end of it. Maybe that's why they threw that on there. And the sound,
Abbey Road.
Yeah, well, Sgt. Pepper had it too with the never to see any other one, never to see. And then you hear like
the E chord.
Yeah, and then you hear like the noise that only Paul Stanley's fucking Paul McCartney's dog can hear. He put that in there. It's just so dogs could enjoy the last note in Sgt. Pepper. Anyway, maybe that's why they threw it on there, because otherwise it's just a nothingness. But that's basically Destroyer. I mean, that's the greatest Kiss album.
Yeah, this episode is longer than Destroyer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because last week's wasn't very hard because fucking Dress to Kill is only 30 minutes. That is a quick
This
album.
one's like 34, 37, something like
34
that.
minutes. Yeah. But again, it finally captures that sonic boom that Kiss has been trying to capture since day one. And the next two albums keep that going big time. But then one of the interesting things to be talking about on the Kiss podcast is the fracturing that starts to happen within the band.
They become a victim of their own success.
And boy, do they flame out quick, and it's something that like Paul and Gene, as I get older, when I was younger, it always bummed me out that this happened, but them trying desperately to keep that image of Kiss, because that's what Kiss is the image, trying to keep this band together when behind closed doors, it is
chaos.
Yeah, absolute chaos. But, again, any kind of closing thoughts on Destroyer?
I mean, it's a great album. It's one of the the great albums from the 70s.
Would you put this up with like other great rock and roll albums of all time?
Yes, with the caveat that there's going to be a lot of albums in front of it.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like, because again, this is an album that comes out when Led Zeppelin is still king.
Yeah. At this point, they've put out like Houses of the Holy or something like that.
And so for
Maybe
Kiss,
Physical Graffiti.
Yeah, and I think one of the things people I think started to relate to with Kiss was there was, at least now, later on there'd be a lot of bullshit, but there's no bullshit. Granted you have overdubs and weird stuff going on, but at the end of the day, they're not changing. Their sounds are changing a bit, and they're testing things, and it's working, a la Beth, or not working like Great Expectations.
They're more confident too. A lot more confident.
Yeah, it's a band that has finally got the credit it deserved. And that's why I think that explosion of creativity, and again, you cannot overstate how important Bob Ezrin is to Kiss.
He is, yeah. I mean, we mentioned this on the Beatles podcast when George Martin died, because you could be the best band in the world, but if you got a shit producer, you're going to sound like shit.
Yeah.
You could be a mediocre band, like, say, maybe... Oh, God.
Some people would say Kiss.
Some people would say Kiss. Some people would say The Doors.
Yeah.
Because as much as I love The Doors, there's only like 3 good Doors albums.
Yeah.
And The Soft Parade isn't one of them. But the... Sorry, Jake.
I like the song.
But a great producer can make you... the Beatles were really lucky when they found George Martin. Kiss was really lucky when they found Bob Ezrin.
Yeah.
The Foo Fighters were really lucky when they found Gil Norton for their second album, The Color and the Shape.
Yeah. Roy Thomas Baker with Queen.
Sure, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, again, it shows that they found their producer. They found their sound on their first fucking album, but they got that.
They didn't get the production to match it, though.
Yeah. And this is the album that it all clicks.
And everything comes together. They're confident as musicians. They're not consumed by their own demons. Certainly not Ace or Peter yet.
Yeah.
And, they finally, They know what they're doing. They've paid their dues at this point, and now they're reaping the rewards.
Exactly. So we'll talk about some of the later stuff. Some really fun albums coming up next. Thanks again for coming on, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And remember to rock and roll all night and party every day.
And shout it out loud.
That's right. Thanks for listening, guys. See ya.
This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a new commentary every Monday. We've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.